My name is Sarah. The events I'm about to describe may sound like something out of a soap opera, but they are all true. To me, they represent a past I'd rather not remember. It all began when I was approaching my late 20s. As those around me got married, I felt a growing sense of loneliness, as if I was being left behind. I was literally desperate to get married. Perhaps that made me somewhat blind to love. Anyone who would say they liked me was good enough. In this state of mind, I asked a friend at work if they knew anyone suitable. Not really expecting much. Surprisingly, they did introduce someone. Even a lawyer, a profession that many would envy. I'll be honest, the thought of dating a lawyer and the sense of superiority it would bring was appealing. So, I eagerly asked my friend to set it up. Nice to meet you, I'm Sarah. Nice to meet you, too. I'm Ryan. That was our first meeting. Ryan seemed like a nice, serious, and kind young man, exactly the type of person I wanted as a boyfriend. I assume you know, but I work as a lawyer. I'm just a regular office worker. I get a bit nervous talking to a lawyer. Oh, I'm not that difficult to talk to in my private life. In fact, I'm often told I'm too frivolous. Really? That's unexpected. I get that a lot. I assume you heard from a friend that I only graduated from high school. I really shouldn't be in a position to talk with a lawyer. Nonsense. Your educational background doesn't matter. Please, see me as an individual. Ryan. Thank you. You see, I couldn't go to university because of my family's situation. At the time, it didn't bother me, but once I entered the workforce, every time someone looked at the education section of my resume ending with high school and frowned, I realized the world wasn't so forgiving. However, Ryan said he didn't care about that, which made me genuinely happy. He was easy to talk to, had plenty of topics to discuss, and knew how to make me feel entertained. I enjoyed our conversations, and the atmosphere felt right. Is it this late already? Are you going home by taxi? Yes, that's the plan. Then, please let me pay for it. Oh, that would be too much. We've just met today. That's exactly why. What? Could we possibly meet again? I'll pay for the taxi now, and in return, please go on another date with me. I couldn't refuse. His words sounded like something from a soap opera, and my heart fluttered in a way it never had before. I mistook this for the beginning of love. After that, we began to meet frequently. Most of the time, Ryan initiated our meetings. Surely, he took a liking to me. I thought so selfishly. Here, would you accept this? What is it? Open it. I bought it thinking it would suit you. I hope you like it. Wow. It's a necklace from a popular brand. Yes. I asked the store clerk for a recommendation, and this is what they suggested. Thank you. I'm really happy. Good to hear that you like it. We were an ideal couple that anyone would envy. He was a lawyer by profession, kind-hearted, paid for all our dates, and never missed giving gifts. All my friends were envious when I told them about him. Perhaps I was a bit conceited in that environment. And it didn't take long for us to get married. Ryan proposed after we'd been dating for 6 months. And of course, I immediately said yes. At the time, I thought nothing of it. But now I think getting married after only 6 months was too soon. We were probably only seeing each other's good sides, not even trying to see the bad. It was undoubtedly premature. Of course, everyone around us celebrated. I had friends who were envious, and I felt very good about it. Now newlyweds, however, I soon realized that this marriage was a mistake. Ryan, you're late again today? Yeah, there's a company party, so I don't need dinner. Okay. But we're newlyweds. I thought maybe we could spend a little more time together. What? What do you think I'm working hard for? That is, since you became part-time after we got married, our household income has dropped. So it's only natural I have to work, right? Yes, I really appreciate that. Then stop complaining. You just need to keep quiet and follow what I say. Okay, I'll do that. Since getting married, I quit my job and started working part-time at a supermarket near our new home. I had more time, and since my husband was a high-income lawyer, we weren't struggling financially. Everyone at my new job was friendly and easy to talk to. Yet, despite having more time and financial comfort, I felt a hole in my heart every day, feeling lonely. I doubted Ryan would understand even if I expressed this to him. Ryan used to understand me better than anyone else, and I could consult him about anything. I wonder when I started feeling the need to be overly cautious around him. Looking back, it seems to have started after we got married. After we officially became husband and wife, Ryan's personality changed completely. Could this be his true character? Had he been pretending all this time? Could it be that he revealed his true self only after making sure I couldn't escape by marrying me? Thinking this far, I was horrified. I should stop thinking such strange thoughts. It couldn't possibly be true for Ryan. To prove my thoughts wrong, I made an effort to express my feelings to him. Hey Ryan, would you like to go out to eat sometime soon? There's a place I've been wanting to try. Out to eat? Give me a break, I've been going out with my boss every day. I want to rest on my days off. You might feel that way, but I've been stuck at home. I'd like to go out to eat once in a while. Huh? Are you asking me to indulge your whims? Well, calling it whims. You don't have to say it like that. I just wanted to go out with you, Ryan. That's exactly what being whimsical is. You know, that's quite bothersome. Why would you say that? When we were dating, we used to go out to eat together and visit various places. Well, when we were dating, I had to bait the fish, didn't I? What? Haven't you heard? Men don't feed the fish they've caught. That's. I didn't care as long as I got a wife who would obey me. That's so, how can you say that? What's the problem? You have an easy job, and you're not struggling for money, right? It's not about that. I wanted to build a happy home together. Oh, I'm not interested in that. Ryan said this nonchalantly, waving his hand dismissively. I couldn't stop my tears. I had been deceived by Ryan all this time. It was wrong of me to be deceived, but this was too much. I immediately considered divorce. It hadn't been long since we got married, but I couldn't bear to be with such a person. Yet, I didn't have the courage to consult my friends or parents. After receiving such blessings from everyone, the idea of getting a divorce so quickly, I just didn't have the courage to tell them. Anyway, I proposed a divorce to Ryan. Ryan, I never thought you were this kind of person. Huh? What, you just realized this is my true nature and you're disillusioned now? Yes, I'm disappointed. Fortunately, we don't have children, and I want a divorce. Divorce? You, who works part-time, want a divorce? Yes. That's hilarious. How do you plan to live after divorcing me? When you've been living off my income? That's. You can't even consult your friends or parents, can you? If you leave me, you'll really have nowhere to go, right? That may be true, but being treated like a servant by you here is far worse. What did you say? Let's get a divorce, Ryan. I can't stay with you anymore. I don't want to. Is that so? If you insist that much, I'll grant you the divorce. But remember, you'll be the one crawling back to me, because I am a lawyer. Ryan insulted me, calling me useless and good for nothing. But I gritted my teeth and endured, handing him the divorce papers. His words were cruel but true. I had nowhere to go. I didn't want to worry my parents, and I couldn't tell my friends, who had blessed me so warmly, about this reality. Ryan was cold until the end. The moment I filled out the divorce papers, he chased me out, saying, "Get out now. You are a stranger to me." With few belongings, I quickly packed and was thrown out of the house. The next day, as if being chased away, I rolled my suitcase aimlessly, fortunate that it was still light outside. I have to work tomorrow, so I need to find a nearby hotel or something. Is that you, Sarah? Huh? I turned around to the sudden voice and saw my best friend Nicole, who had given the friend representative speech at my wedding. Why are you rolling a suitcase around? Don't tell me you ran away from home. Just kidding, though. Nicole. What? Seeing Nicole's innocent smile, I couldn't stop my tears and started sobbing. Sensing something, Nicole invited me, "Come to my place for now." So, what happened? You don't have to say if you don't want to. Nicole had always been this way. She seemed tough and brusque. But she cared about me more than anyone and knew how to read the situation. I loved Nicole for that. I was really happy when she celebrated my marriage. Thinking about that, I started crying again. You know, I might be overstepping, but is it about your husband? What? Did I hit the mark with that face? Yes, but how did you know? Well, it's just a hunch. But you know, that husband, Ryan, right? He seemed a bit shady from the moment I met him. Is that so? But I didn't say anything because you looked so happy. Thinking it would be tactless to speak up. Maybe I should have told you. No, I probably wouldn't have paid any attention even if you had told me at that time. Yeah, that was highly likely. Thank you, Nicole. For what? I feel a bit better thanks to you. That's good. But, don't you have more you want to talk about? Yeah. For now, just stay over tonight. It looks like you ran out of your house without a place to stay, right? Thank you, Nicole. Nicole's kindness brought tears to my eyes again. She teased me about crying too much, but even that made me happy. And I ended up crying even more. Eventually, I cried myself out while she rubbed my back. While staying at Nicole's place, I searched for what I really wanted to do. Of course, while continuing to work part-time. I tried to pay the rent from my modest salary. But she wouldn't accept it until I earned a bit more. I thought hard about what I wanted to do, what I really enjoyed. Once I figured out my feelings, I planned to tell my parents about the divorce. By the way, Nicole. Yeah? Didn't you have a boyfriend? Is it okay for me to stay here? Oh, that's fine. We got divorced. What, you were married? Why didn't you tell me? I would have brought a gift. It was more like we just got married because it felt right at the moment. And it wasn't really a celebratory mood. That's so. And, as expected, we got divorced. It was good that I didn't bother mentioning it. That was why I thought maybe you had some worries. When I saw how down you were, Sarah. I see. But honestly, the divorce isn't finalized yet. He's not agreeing to it. I'm actually in the middle of trying to get it officially done. Is that like, you're in court? Kind of. He's demanding alimony, but I don't think I need to pay. I think so too. But he just won't accept it. So it's dragging on. Couldn't a lawyer settle this quickly? I thought so too, but his lawyer is quite skilled. Every time we go to court and it looks like we might lose, my lawyer quit at once. That's terrible. Well, never mind my story. Just relax. Okay. Learning about Nicole's situation, I started studying law in between my part-time jobs. Initially, I wanted to understand what she was going through. As I studied, I surprisingly found myself enjoying learning about law. The more I learned, the more engrossed I became, devouring books on law. I never imagined that this would significantly change my life. After a few years, I quit my part-time job. And Nicole was still in divorce mediation with her husband. However, our circumstances had drastically changed. Nicole and I were in front of the courthouse. Today was Nicole's 5th divorce mediation session. We entered the courthouse in suits, and the lawyer we had hired was already there. Hello, I'm Nicole. Hello, I'm honored to take your case. My name is Ryan. Huh? There stood my ex-husband, Ryan. I wasn't surprised, but Ryan seemed shocked to see me. Wait, what? Why are you here? I'm here because I'm Nicole's friend. I came because I was worried. You're accompanying a friend? That's funny. Ryan made a disdainful remark. Nicole looked upset, but I assured her with my eyes. I wouldn't expect a high school graduate to be here in court. It's so out of place. Oh, you might get sued. Let's not talk about that. Please focus on representing me today. All right. But you'll owe me a lot if we win. After all, it seems many lawyers have given up on this case. Ryan laughed crudely and entered the courtroom. We followed. Let's start by having everyone introduce themselves. I've already said this many times, but I'm Nicole's husband, Jason. And I'm his wife, Nicole. Let's review the reasons and circumstances for the divorce. Jason, could you start? Yes. Thus, the solemn divorce mediation began. The proceedings went smoothly. But it was clear that Jason's lawyer was formidable, and we were at a disadvantage. I didn't know before, but it turned out Ryan's lawyer skills weren't so great. He couldn't argue back, and he was sweating profusely. Nicole, who should have been the client, sighed. That concludes our argument. Considering the situation, I think it's fair for Nicole to pay the alimony. Understood. Now, let's hear from Nicole. Well, this is. Excuse me, Your Honor, may I have a word? What? As Ryan wiped his sweat and attempted to speak, Nicole quickly raised her hand. Surprised, Ryan inadvertently dropped his handkerchief to the floor. I apologize for the interruption during the trial, but I would like to change my lawyer. Huh? What? Legally, it is possible to change lawyers during the proceedings. But you will need to appoint a replacement lawyer. Yes, I am aware of that. What are you talking about? I would like to request that Ms. Sarah White, a law student here, take over as my lawyer instead of Mr. Ryan Baker. Huh? What did you say? Sarah is a law student. Wait, you want to appoint Sarah as your lawyer? Your Honor, is that acceptable? If both parties agree, I have no objections. Of course, I have no objections. The opposing lawyer looked at us as if watching something amusing, his gaze dripping with scorn. He must think that a mere law student couldn't possibly win against him. Wait a minute. I didn't hear about this. I am your lawyer. That may have been true, but it doesn't seem like you can win against him. Therefore, I'd rather ask Sarah, my most trusted friend. Do you even realize what you're saying? A law student defending is unusual enough. But to entrust your defense to a dropout like her? Yes, any problems? Of course there's a problem. Your Honor, let's adjourn this trial. Why is that? This woman is a high school graduate with hardly any brains. It's wrong for someone like her to even enter a courtroom. I can't let that stand. What do you mean? As it turns out, she is affiliated with one of the country's top law schools and has achieved the top academic honors there. What? Huh? She is fully capable as a lawyer. Certainly more than someone who judges others by their education. What are you talking about? This woman, top of her class. Now, let's proceed. Mr. Baker, if you have any issues, would you like to be excused from the court? What? Well. Ordered to leave, Ryan protested and caused a scene, which only garnered more disfavor from the judge. Eventually, Ryan couldn't say anything more and left the courtroom saying, "Do whatever you want." In cases where a student represents, a guardian is required. But the judge offered to take on that role. Unbeknownst to others, it was the judge who had recommended me for this position. He had recognized my talent as a law student early on. Although it might sound self-serving, I believe my ability to absorb legal knowledge is exceptional. Although I never liked studying much, I seem to be a different person when it comes to law. Perhaps my motivation to help Nicole also played a role. It was only later that I realized I also had a desire to become a better lawyer than Ryan. So, when Nicole chose me over Ryan and the judge revealed my true identity, I felt incredibly validated. The frustrations I had been holding back cleared up in an instant. When Ryan was leaving the courtroom, he seemed so small. I couldn't believe I had once loved such a man and had been manipulated by him. That made me incredibly angry. But for now, I needed to focus on the present. In the end, Nicole and we won the case. Surprisingly, it turned out that being a lawyer was my true calling. Nicole and I rejoiced, holding hands. This event quickly became news. The story of a law student defeating a skilled lawyer was unprecedented. And ironically, my educational background made it even more sensational. The headline read, "Your aspirations have nothing to do with your education." And I was featured in the media every day. Consequently, Ryan, who had looked down on me, also became news. Portrayed as the lowest of the low among lawyers. With such a label, Ryan was inevitably fired from his law firm. After such reports, re-employment might be difficult for him. One day, Ryan contacted me. "Sarah, I was wrong. I apologize. So, can you explain to the media? What I said about you was a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding? What's misunderstood? Isn't it all true? Don't say that. Look, if it helps, we can get back together, right? I'm astonished. You really live in a fantasy world. What? Goodbye. I don't want to see or talk to you anymore. Wait, Sarah. I forcefully ended the call. It's been months since I last contacted him. And I don't know what he's up to now, but he's probably not leading a decent life. Nicole and I now live together in a sort of roommate situation. Free of the burdens we once carried, enjoying life more than ever. Whether we'll ever marry again, I don't know. But at least for now, the freedom we have is priceless to us.
The words slithered across the dining room in perfect Spanish, sharp and precise, meant to cut deep if only I could understand them. But they didn't know about my secret lessons, didn't realize I'd spent the last year learning their language. Every syllable landed like a dagger as I stood frozen in the hallway, wine bottle clutched against my chest. "She can't be included in the will," Linda's voice carried through the crack in the door. "Mark's mansion belongs in Spanish blood. We need to make sure she never finds out about the inheritance clause." "David won't like it," Ethan replied, his usual jovial tone replaced by something colder. "He actually loves the girl. My son will understand once we explain. Family legacy matters more than some American wife he barely knows. I'm Nora, and until 30 seconds ago, I thought I was finally breaking through with my mother-in-law. 12 months of perfect smiles, helping with family events, learning their language in secret to surprise them all. Now the crystal wine bottle felt like it might shatter in my trembling grip. "The lawyer said we need to act fast," Linda continued, "before Mark changes his mind about the property distribution. That old fool's getting sentimental about Nora's dedication to the family." Her laugh was bitter coffee and broken glass. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to keep my heels from clicking on the hardwood as I backed away. The dining room door remained cracked open, spilling warm light and cold truths into the darkened hallway. Voices continued their plotting, but blood rushed too loudly in my ears to make out the words. My back hit the kitchen island. I set the wine down before I could drop it, gripping the counter's edge until my knuckles went white. David's face flashed in my mind, his warm brown eyes, the way he'd kissed me this morning before heading to work. Did he know? Was my husband part of this scheme to cut me out of his uncle's will? "Nora, everything okay in here?" I spun around to find Rachel, David's sister, watching me with concern. She held an empty serving dish, clearly on her way to the kitchen for seconds. How long had she been standing there? "Fine," I managed, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "Just getting more wine for dinner." I grabbed the bottle again, plastering on the smile I'd perfected over months of family gatherings. Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly. "You look pale, did you hear?" "We need that wine," Linda's voice boomed as she swept into the kitchen, Ethan close behind. Her face showed no trace of the venom I'd heard moments ago. "Everyone's glasses are getting low, dear. What's taking so long?" I lifted the bottle, letting the crystal catch the light. "Just admiring Uncle Mark's excellent taste. He always brings the best vintages to family dinner." Linda's smile flickered for just a moment. "Yes, well, Mark has always been generous, when it suits him." She plucked the wine from my hands and gestured toward the dining room. "Shall we?" I followed her back to the table where David sat discussing business with Uncle Mark. My husband's face lit up when I took my seat beside him, his hand finding mine under the table. The touch that usually brought comfort now raised questions that burned in my throat. How much did he know? How long had they been planning this? And most importantly, what was I going to do about it? I watched Linda pour the wine with practiced grace, her rings catching the light as she moved around the table. She taught me that proper Spanish families always serve their guests first, one of many lessons in her endless crusade to mold me into her vision of a suitable daughter-in-law. Now I understood. I was never meant to fit in. I was meant to be managed, contained, and ultimately excluded. I raised my glass when Mark proposed a toast to family and smiled as the others echoed the sentiment. But beneath the table, my free hand curled into a fist. They wanted to play games with inheritance and blood? Fine. I'd show them exactly how well I'd learned to play. The wedding photo mocked me from its silver frame, David and I beaming at each other under Spanish sunlight. I traced the edge of the frame, remembering how Linda had insisted on displaying it prominently in our living room. "To show everyone how beautifully you've joined our family," she'd said. Now those words carried a different weight. 3 days had passed since the dinner, 3 days of pretending nothing had changed while everything had shattered. David noticed something was off, he always did, but I deflected his concerns with practiced smiles and casual excuses about work stress. My phone buzzed. A message from Linda. Lunch tomorrow at the club? Just us girls. The audacity almost made me laugh. I typed back wouldn't miss it while my other hand clenched into a fist. You're doing that thing again, David said from behind me, making me jump. He stood in the doorway of our bedroom, loosening his tie. That thing where you're somewhere else entirely. Just tired. I set the phone down, screen dark. How was your meeting with Uncle Mark? Something flickered across David's face, so brief I almost missed it. Postponed. Mother needed him for something urgent about the estate. Of course she did. I watched David move around our room, his movements precise and controlled like always. He'd learned that from Linda, that careful way of holding himself that revealed nothing. I was thinking, I said, keeping my voice light. Maybe we could visit the mansion this weekend. I'd love to see those gardens Uncle Mark mentioned. David paused halfway through hanging up his jacket. This weekend might not work. Mother's planning some renovation discussions with Mark. She seems very involved with his property lately. She's family. His tone carried a slight edge. It's natural to be concerned about these things. I stood up, moving to help him with his tie like I always did. Our evening ritual. His skin was warm under my fingers as I worked the silk loose. And what am I? What? Am I family too? His hands caught mine, stilling them. Nora, where is this coming from? I met his eyes, searching for any sign he knew about his mother's plans. But David's gaze was clear, concerned, and completely unreadable, just like Linda had taught him. Nowhere, I said, pulling away. Just being silly. My phone buzzed again. Rachel this time. Need to talk. Coffee tomorrow before your lunch with Mom? Interesting. I replied with a quick yes, ignoring David's questioning look. I'm going to take a shower, I announced, needing space to think. But David caught my arm as I passed. Hey, he said softly. You know you can tell me anything, right? For a moment, I almost did. Almost let the truth spill out about his mother's schemes, Ethan's complicity, the Spanish conversations they thought I couldn't understand. But then I remembered Linda's voice in the dining room. My son will understand once we explain. They were so sure of their control over him. Were they right? I stretched up and kissed his cheek instead. I know. The lie tasted bitter, but I swallowed it down. In the shower, I let hot water drum against my shoulders while planning tomorrow's conversations. Rachel wanting to meet first couldn't be a coincidence. The question was whether she was an ally or another piece in Linda's game. When I emerged, David was on his phone speaking rapid Spanish. He switched to English when he saw me, but not before I caught madre and mansión in the mix. Mother says she's looking forward to lunch tomorrow, he said after hanging up. She wants to discuss some family traditions she thinks you'd enjoy learning. I bet she does. I smiled, remembering my Spanish teacher's words about the importance of patience in mastering a language. That sounds wonderful. I'm always eager to learn more about proper Spanish family values. David beamed, clearly pleased by my enthusiasm. He had no idea each word was a weapon I was sharpening. Later, lying beside him in the dark, I listened to his steady breathing and thought about the choices ahead. Tomorrow I'd meet Rachel, then Linda. 2 conversations that could change everything. I touched my wedding ring, remembering our vows. For better or worse, we'd promised. I wondered if David had known then just how much worse things could get. My phone lit up one last time, a message from Uncle Mark. Be careful who you trust, Pequeña. Even family can wear masks. I turned off the phone and closed my eyes, but sleep stayed far away. Rachel's coffee sat untouched between us, steam rising in accusatory spirals. They've been planning this for months, she said, sliding her phone across the cafe table. Look at the timestamp on these messages. My hands didn't shake as I scrolled through the WhatsApp conversation between Linda and Ethan. Perfect Spanish grammar discussing perfect plans to manipulate Uncle Mark's inheritance. The timestamps went back to my wedding day. Why show me this now? Rachel's fingers drummed against her cup. Because yesterday, Mother asked me to be a witness for some legal documents about the mansion. She leaned forward, voice dropping. They're trying to prove Mark is mentally unfit to manage his estate. The cafe's morning chatter faded to white noise. I handed back her phone, mind racing through implications. Does David know? David knows what Mother wants him to know. Rachel's smile was bitter, just like always. My phone buzzed, Linda confirming our lunch. The screen showed a photo of her and me from last Christmas, both smiling. I deleted it with one swipe. There's more, Rachel said. Check Mark's Instagram activity from last night. I pulled up his profile, noting several new posts about the mansion's renovation. The latest photo stopped my breath. David and Linda standing in Mark's study, examining papers spread across his antique desk. The caption read, "Family business meetings, time to secure our legacy." The timestamp 3 a.m. "He told me that meeting was canceled," I said, my voice strange in my ears. "That he was home sleeping." Rachel's expression softened. "Nora, there's something else you should—" The cafe door chimed. Ethan walked in, spotting us immediately. His surprise looked rehearsed. What a delightful coincidence. He moved toward our table with practiced charm. "Rachel, dear, your mother's been trying to reach you about those documents." "I bet she has." Rachel stood, gathering her things. She caught my eye briefly. "Think about what I said, Nora, about everything." I watched her leave, noting how Ethan's smile never reached his eyes. He took her vacant seat without asking. "Lovely morning for coffee," he said in Spanish, testing me. "Though I hear the club serves better brew, Linda's quite looking forward to lunch." I matched his language, letting my accent slip just enough to be noticeable. "So am I. Will you be joining us, Ethan?" His pause was microscopic but telling. "Unfortunately not. Business calls." He switched to English. "Though I hear you and David might be interested in some property discussions soon, Linda mentioned—" "How is the mansion renovation going?" I interrupted, watching his face. "The Instagram photos look fascinating, especially the late-night meetings." Something calculated moved behind his eyes. "Social media can be misleading. Pictures don't tell whole stories." "No," I agreed, standing, "but timestamps rarely lie." I left him sitting there, feeling his gaze follow me out. In my car, I pulled up my laptop and logged into the family's shared cloud drive, access courtesy of David's saved passwords. Linda's meticulous filing system made it easy to find the legal documents: draft papers declaring Uncle Mark incompetent, witness statements ready for signatures, property transfer arrangements dated 3 months before my wedding. My phone buzzed again. "David, Mother says you're meeting for lunch. Everything okay?" I thought about his face in that 3 a.m. photo, bent over papers that would destroy his uncle's legacy. Thought about all the nights he'd lied about where he was, what he was doing. Another message arrived. Uncle Mark this time. "Need to talk. Come to the mansion. Now." I started the car, mind already mapping out what I needed to know, what evidence to gather. The mansion was only 15 minutes away. Linda wouldn't expect me at the club for another hour. My phone lit up once more. "Rachel, be careful. There are more players in this game than you know." I pulled into traffic, heading toward the mansion's familiar gates. They'd all underestimated me, thought I was just the American wife who couldn't understand their precious Spanish, their family schemes, their legacy games. Time to show them exactly how wrong they were. The mansion loomed ahead, its windows watching like dark eyes. Uncle Mark stood waiting at the entrance, his expression grim. "You figured it out, haven't you?" he asked as I approached. "Parts of it," I replied, "but I have a feeling you're about to tell me the rest." He nodded, opening the heavy door. "Come inside, Pequeña. Let me show you what they're really fighting for." Uncle Mark's study smelled of old leather and secrets. He spread photographs across his desk, not the staged family portraits Linda loved, but surveillance shots. Linda and Ethan entering law offices, David at late-night meetings, documents changing hands in parking lots. "I've been watching them for months," Mark said, tapping one photo. "Ever since they started pushing for power of attorney." My fingers traced the edge of a photo showing David accepting an envelope from Ethan. The timestamp matched our anniversary dinner. "You knew everything." "Not everything," Mark's voice carried an edge I'd never heard before, "but enough to know they're after more than just the mansion." Sophie's text lit up my phone. "Where are you? Linda's at the club, furious you missed lunch." I silenced the phone, focusing on the evidence before me. "What else are they after?" Mark pulled out a leather portfolio. "The real estate holdings are just the surface. There's a foundation, set up by my father. Old money, carefully hidden." His laugh was bitter. "Linda always thought she could charm her way into controlling it." "And David?" "David," Mark hesitated. "Show her, Rachel." I turned to find Rachel in the doorway holding a USB drive. She must have followed me here. "These are the real documents," she said, plugging it into Mark's laptop. "The ones Mother and Ethan don't know I copied." The screen filled with contracts, emails, bank statements. My husband's signature appeared on papers dated weeks before our wedding, agreeing to terms I couldn't quite grasp. "They're using your marriage," Rachel said quietly. American wife, international property laws. If they can prove Mark incompetent and you unfit to inherit, the foundation money stays in Spanish control. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. That's why Linda pushed so hard for the wedding to happen quickly. My phone buzzed again. David. Mother says you missed lunch. Everything okay? Call me. Mark watched me stare at the message. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I looked at the evidence spread across the desk. My husband's betrayal documented in times, dates, and signatures. I need to talk to Sophie. Careful, Rachel warned. She's been having lunch with Mother twice a month since your wedding. The floor seemed to tilt. Sophie, my best friend, my confidant, the person I'd trusted with every doubt about Linda's behavior. You're sure? Rachel pulled up surveillance photos on her phone. Sophie and Linda at expensive restaurants, heads bent together over papers. Mother likes to hedge her bets. I gripped the edge of Mark's desk, steadying myself. Why are you helping me? Because I'm tired of watching Mother destroy people for money. Rachel's voice cracked slightly. And because you're the first person who might actually be able to stop her. My phone lit up again. Linda this time. Darling, we simply must discuss the Foundation's annual gala. Call immediately. The gala, of course, the perfect public venue for announcing Mark's condition and their new control of the estate. When is it? I asked. 3 weeks, Mark replied. They're planning to make their move then. I picked up one of the surveillance photos. Linda and Ethan laughing with Sophie at some cafe I'd never seen. The betrayal burned cold in my chest, crystallizing into something harder than hurt. Rachel, I said, I need access to Mother's social media accounts. All of them. She smiled, pulling out her laptop. Already have them, and Ethan's too. Mark? I turned to him. How do you feel about making some very public posts about the Foundation's future? He leaned back, studying me. What exactly did you have in mind? I pulled up Linda's Instagram, where she'd carefully crafted their perfect family image. I think it's time for some truth to leak out, starting with these documents Rachel found. They'll fight back, Mark warned. Let them. I started typing, watching Linda's carefully curated world prepare to unravel. They wanted to play games with family loyalty? Fine, let's see how they handle a real scandal. Rachel's phone chimed. Ethan, asking about the witness documents. She showed me the message, eyebrows raised. Tell him you'll meet tomorrow, I said. We need them thinking everything's still under control. As Rachel typed her response, I looked at the photo of David again, the envelope passing between hands on our anniversary night. The hurt was still there, but something else had replaced it, something cold and precise and ready. One more thing, I said to Mark. I need everything you have on Sophie's involvement. Every meeting, every document, every conversation. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Planning to start with the weakest link? No, I replied, watching Linda's social media notifications start to ping. Planning to end with it. Sophie's contact photo flashed on my phone for the third time that morning. I watched it ring out, focusing instead on Linda's Instagram feed scrolling across my laptop. Rachel sat beside me at Mark's desk, monitoring the growing chaos on other platforms. Mother's trying to delete the posts, Rachel said, fingers flying across her keyboard. But I've got screenshots circulating faster than she can catch them. The documents we'd leaked, carefully selected pages showing Linda and Ethan's plans for Mark's estate, had sparked exactly the firestorm we'd expected. Their carefully curated social circle was imploding with questions and accusations. David's calling again, I said, watching my husband's name light up the screen. He sounds desperate. Let him sweat. Rachel's voice carried an edge I was starting to recognize. He made his choice when he signed those papers. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Please talk to me. I can explain everything. Speaking of choices, Rachel nodded at the message. Ready for phase 2? I pulled up the surveillance photos of Sophie's secret meetings with Linda. Set up the lunch, make sure Linda knows nothing about it. Rachel typed quickly, then paused. Ethan's posting damage control, says the documents are fake, claims someone's trying to destroy the family's reputation. I smiled, remembering Linda's own words from that first dinner. Family legacy matters more than some American wife he barely knows. The mansion's doorbell chimed. Mark's voice carried from downstairs, followed by familiar footsteps. David. He's not supposed to be here, Rachel hissed, closing her laptop. Mother must have sent him. I stood, straightening my spine. Good, let's see what story they've given him to tell. David burst into the study, his usual composure shattered. What the hell is happening? Mother's hysterical, Ethan's threatening lawyers, and you're not answering your phone. Interesting priorities, I replied in Spanish, watching his face. Your mother's hysteria comes first? He flinched at my perfect accent. How long have you? Long enough. I gestured to the surveillance photos spread across Mark's desk. Want to explain that envelope from our anniversary night? Color drained from his face as he recognized the image. Nora, I can explain. Can you explain Sophie too? I pushed forward a photo of him meeting my best friend and his mother at a restaurant I'd never seen. Or should I ask her at lunch tomorrow? You don't understand. He stepped closer, reaching for me. Mother said it was to protect the family's interests. The family? I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make him step back. You mean the family that's been planning to declare your uncle mentally unfit? The family that used our marriage as a legal shield for fraud? Rachel moved to stand beside me, her presence steady. David's eyes darted between us, realization dawning. Rachel, you're part of this? I'm part of stopping it, she corrected. Someone has to. My phone lit up again, Ethan this time. The message preview showed panic. Need to talk. Linda's losing control. The foundation board is asking questions. Perfect. Your mother's house of cards is falling, I told David, switching back to English. The question is, whose side will you choose when it collapses? There aren't sides, he protested. We're family. Family doesn't conspire to destroy each other. Mark's voice cut through the room as he entered. Your mother forgot that lesson long ago. David's face crumpled as Mark laid out more evidence. Years of manipulation, secret accounts, planned betrayals. Each revelation seemed to age him, stripping away the polished facade his mother had crafted. My phone buzzed continuously now. Sophie, Linda, Ethan, all desperate to contain what couldn't be contained. I thought of Linda's smug smile at that first dinner, thinking I couldn't understand their plots and plans. The foundation board meets tomorrow, Mark announced. They'll want answers about these documents. Mother will find a way to explain, David said weakly. She always does. Not this time. I pulled up Linda's social media accounts where her carefully constructed image was unraveling comment by comment. The truth doesn't need explanation. David stared at the screen, watching his mother's world collapse in real time. What do you want? Want? I thought of all the dinners, all the subtle insults, all the schemes. I want exactly what your mother taught me about family legacy, that it belongs to those strong enough to protect it. His phone rang. Linda again. David looked at me, then at the evidence of his betrayal spread across the desk, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. The phone kept ringing as the sun set through Mark's study windows, casting long shadows across our fractured family portrait. The foundation boardroom felt like a tomb, all mahogany and money and dead silence. I sat across from Linda, watching her perfectly manicured nails tap against her water glass. Ethan flanked her left, David her right, a united front of familiar betrayal. These accusations are groundless, Linda's lawyer declared, spreading documents across the table. The supposed evidence has been doctored, clearly an attempt to destabilize the foundation's leadership. I didn't speak, just pulled up the surveillance photos on the boardroom's display screen. Linda with Sophie, David accepting envelopes, Ethan's secret meetings. The timestamp on each photo felt like another nail in their coffin. Circumstantial, Ethan snapped, but his voice wavered. The board members exchanged glances. These weren't Linda's usual sycophants. These were old money, old power, old secrets. Perhaps, the board chairman said, we should hear from Mark himself. The door opened, but instead of Mark, Sophie walked in. My stomach dropped. She wouldn't meet my eyes as she took her seat next to Linda's lawyer. Miss Chen has provided sworn testimony, the lawyer announced, about certain irregularities in how this evidence was obtained. The photos vanished from the screen, replaced by documents I'd never seen. Emails in my name, bank transfers. Carefully constructed proof that I'd orchestrated everything to steal control of the foundation. That's impossible, I started, but Sophie finally looked at me, her expression a perfect mask of regret. I'm sorry, Nora, she said softly, but I have to tell the truth about what you asked me to do. The betrayal tasted like copper in my mouth. I looked at Rachel, but she was staring at her phone, face pale. Mark's been in an accident, she whispered. He's in surgery. Linda's smile widened fractionally. Of course, the one person who could corroborate everything, conveniently silenced. Given these developments, the chairman began, and considering Mark's unfortunate inability to attend, Wait, David's voice cut through the room. He stood, pulling out his phone. Before we continue, I have something you need to hear. A recording played, Linda's voice, crystal clear. Once we have control of the foundation, we can move the assets wherever we want. Mark won't be able to stop us once the doctors declare him unfit. Linda's face went rigid. David, what are you doing? What I should have done months ago. He looked at me for the first time since entering the room. I'm choosing a side. You're choosing wrong, Ethan snarled, reaching for the phone, but David stepped back. The recording's already uploaded, he said. Along with everything else, the real documents, the actual plans, everything. Sophie stood abruptly. I need to amend my testimony. Sit down, Linda commanded, but Sophie moved toward me instead. I'm sorry, she whispered. They threatened my family's business, but David showed me proof they were lying about that too. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Linda's lawyer frantically checking his phone, board members whispering, Ethan trying to reach David's phone. Then Rachel's phone lit up again. Mark's out of surgery, she announced, and he's asking for the board chairman. Says he has video testimony recorded yesterday, in case anything happened to him. Linda's glass shattered in her grip, water spreading across the mahogany like blood. You really think you've won? She hissed at me in Spanish. You think these people will ever truly accept you? You're nothing but a foreign gold digger who got lucky. I leaned forward, matching her language perfectly. No, Linda, I'm the daughter-in-law you taught too well. The one who learned exactly how your family handles betrayal. The chairman's phone rang, Mark's doctor. As he answered, I watched Linda's carefully constructed world crumble in real time. Her lawyer gathering his things, board members stepping away, her own son standing firmly beside me. But something in her eyes made me pause. That familiar calculation, that hint of a deeper plan. Check on Mark, I told Rachel urgently. Now. As she rushed out, Linda's smile returned, razor thin and deadly. Family legacy matters more than anything, dear, and some legacies can't be stolen, only destroyed. My phone buzzed. Rachel again. Mark's gone. The nurse says someone tampered with his medication. Police are on their way. The foundation boardroom suddenly felt smaller, darker. Linda's smile grew as she stood, gathering her things with elegant precision. Such a tragedy, she said softly. I wonder who they'll blame. The sound of sirens grew in the distance as David grabbed my arm, urgency in his grip. We need to leave. Now. But Linda blocked the door, her victory absolute in the dying light of day. No, dear, I don't think anyone's going anywhere. The hospital corridor stretched endless and white as I ran, Rachel's footsteps echoing behind me. Mark's room number burned in my mind, 507. But when we reached it, 2 police officers blocked the door. Nobody enters, one said. This is a crime scene. Through the window, I could see medical staff working frantically around Mark's bed. The monitors showed flat lines where there should have been peaks. He's not dead, Rachel's voice cracked. The nurse said he was stable. My phone buzzed. David. Mother's gone, Ethan too. The board members are talking to the police. The elevator dinged. Linda emerged, her designer heels clicking against sterile tiles. She'd changed clothes. No trace of the boardroom confrontation remained. Officers, she called out, voice breaking perfectly. That's my brother-in-law. Please, we need to be with him. Ma'am, we can't. Check his medical directive, she interrupted, producing documents. I'm his legal proxy. The officers examined the papers while Linda caught my eye, her smile razor thin. Such a tragedy, she said in Spanish. First the foundation scandal, now this. The stress must have been too much for him. The medication was tampered with, I replied in the same language. They'll trace it. Will they? The security cameras in this wing malfunctioned an hour ago. Such unreliable technology these days. Rachel's phone chimed. She grabbed my arm, showing me the screen. A live news alert about Mark's sudden collapse following accusations of mental instability. You're going to pin this on me, I realized. The disgruntled daughter-in-law, angry about being cut out of the will. Linda's smile widened fractionally. The evidence is quite compelling. Your fingerprints on his water glass, your recent hostile emails, your public threats about exposing family secrets. Officers, a detective approached, nodding to Linda. We need to ask Miss Walker some questions. Mrs. Castellanos, Linda corrected smoothly, though perhaps not for much longer, given the circumstances. The detective reached for my arm, but Rachel stepped between us. Wait, show them the video, Nora. Linda's composure cracked slightly. What video? I pulled out my phone, hands steady. Mark wasn't just recording testimony yesterday, he was recording you. The screen lit up with footage from Mark's study. Linda and Ethan discussing the foundation, the planned accident, everything, the timestamp less than 24 hours ago. That's inadmissible, Linda snapped. Illegally obtained. Not illegal when it's his house, his study, his security system, Rachel's voice carried down the corridor, and not the only copy. The elevator dinged again. David emerged with the board chairman and 2 more detectives. Mrs. Castellanos, one detective said, "We need you to come with us." Linda's mask finally shattered. She lunged for my phone, but Rachel was faster, backing away with the device already streaming to the cloud. "You think this changes anything?" Linda hissed, switching to Spanish as the detectives approached. "You'll never belong here. This family will never truly be yours." "You're right," I replied, watching her perfect world crumble. "I don't want to belong to your version of family anymore." A commotion erupted from Mark's room. The monitors had changed, peaks where there were flat lines before. "He's stabilizing," a nurse called out. Whatever they gave him, the antidote worked. Linda went pale as Mark's eyes fluttered open. He turned his head slightly, gaze finding mine through the window. "The real medical directive," Rachel whispered, pulling out another set of documents. "The one Mother didn't forge. Mark made me his proxy last week." The detectives were reading Linda her rights now, but I barely heard them. Mark's hand moved weakly, beckoning me closer. The officers finally stepped aside, letting me enter. "Did we get her?" he asked, voice rough. "Yes," I said, taking his hand. "It's over." "Not quite." He squeezed my fingers. "There's still the matter of the will, the real one." Linda's protests echoed down the corridor as they led her away, her carefully constructed legacy dissolving with each step. David appeared in the doorway, looking lost. "Nora, Later," I said, not ready for that conversation yet. Some betrayals needed time to heal. Mark's monitors beeped steadily now, each sound a reminder that sometimes family isn't what you're born into or marry into. It's what you choose to build from the ashes of what burns. The mansion study looked different in morning light. Gone were the surveillance photos and damning documents, replaced by fresh flowers and the day's newspapers. Each headline told the same story: Linda and Ethan's arrest, the foundation scandal, Mark's miraculous recovery. I traced the edge of Mark's desk, remembering that first night I'd overheard their Spanish whispers about inheritance and legacy. The wood felt warmer now, less threatening. "The board approved everything," Rachel said, entering with a stack of papers. "The foundation's yours to manage, along with Mark's voting shares." "And Linda?" "Refusing visitors, even David." Rachel set down a familiar silver frame, my wedding photo. "He's outside, you know. Says he'll wait as long as it takes." I picked up the frame, studying our frozen smiles. "Some things can't be fixed with waiting." "No," Mark's voice came from the doorway as he wheeled himself in, already fighting against doctor's orders to rest. "But some things are worth rebuilding." He handed me an envelope, the real will, dated weeks before the dinner where everything began. My hands didn't shake as I opened it. "I knew Linda would try something eventually," Mark said, "but I needed to see who would stand up to her, who would fight not for money, but for what's right." The document was simple, direct. The mansion and foundation shares split between Rachel and me, with provisions for David contingent on choices he had yet to make. Sophie appeared in the doorway next, hesitant. "The police need my final statement about Linda's threats." "Tell them everything," I said, not looking up from the will. "The whole truth this time." She lingered. "Nora, I know why you did it, but knowing isn't the same as forgetting." She nodded, understanding the weight of what couldn't be undone, and left quietly. Rachel's phone buzzed. Ethan's lawyer, requesting a meeting. "He's offering to testify against Mother in exchange for leniency." "Let him," Mark said. "The truth has its own momentum now." A soft knock drew our attention. David stood in the doorway, looking lost without his mother's influence shadowing him. "The reporters want statements about the foundation's future." "Tell them it's returning to its original mission," Mark answered, "supporting education for immigrant families, starting with Spanish language programs." I felt David's eyes on me, remembering all those secret lessons I'd taken, preparing for a family that never intended to accept me. "I should have chosen differently," David said quietly in Spanish. "Should have been stronger." "Yes," I replied in English. "You should have." Rachel touched my arm. "The detective's here with the last of Linda's papers from the safe deposit box." I gathered the will and wedding photo, ready to leave the study that had started everything. But David blocked the doorway. "What happens now?" he asked. "With us?" I looked at our wedding photo one last time, then set it face down on Mark's desk. Now you learn what your mother never could, that real family isn't about control or legacy or perfect appearances. It's about choices. And second chances? Hope crept into his voice. Maybe, but not today. I moved past him, following Rachel toward the detective, waiting with one final box of Linda's secrets. Behind me, I heard Mark speaking softly to his nephew in Spanish, something about growth and redemption and time. The morning sun streamed through the mansion's windows, casting long shadows that felt less like threats and more like possibilities. Linda had taught me everything about destroying family bonds, but she'd never understood how to build them. That would be my legacy now. Rachel fell into step beside me, already discussing foundation plans and renovation ideas. The detective waited patiently, another box of truth ready to be unpacked. Somewhere in the city, Linda sat in a cell, plotting or perhaps finally learning. And in my pocket, Mark's will carried not just inheritance, but choice, the power to shape whatever came next. Not for revenge anymore, but for something stronger. The mansion's front door stood open to the morning, and for the first time since that dinner so long ago, I felt no need to translate my thoughts into another language. My truth was clear enough in any tongue. I stepped into the light, ready to build something new from all that had burned away.
This house has been given to my parents, actually. So we are also considering divorce. I feel there is no need for relationships anymore. James was staring at me and gave me a sheer order to get out of the house. The insults at me didn't stop from his mouth. His parents appeared to condone his happiness by what they did not say, for neither offered any comment on their son. But their words did not make me falter at all. I meekly nodded, quietly consenting to vacate the gutted home. Inside me, there was a well-thought-out plan. With the luggage I had prepared beforehand, I left the house without hesitation. They still hadn't realized the gravity of the situation that awaited them. My name is Emily. I just turned 50. A long time has passed since our marriage. Our children have become independent and live away from us. I used to lead an ordinary salaried worker's life, but now, through a friend's introduction, I spend fulfilling days as a teacher of handmade accessories, which was my hobby. This new job has become a turning point in my life. Through interactions with my students, sharing the joy of crafting, every day has become fulfilling. Some people might have negative opinions about turning a hobby into a livelihood, but I am very satisfied. James and I met by chance at the company where I used to work. He was employed at a client company at that time, and we started to meet often through work-related social gatherings. Gradually, as we got to know each other, the distance between us shortened naturally. We deepened our relationship and eventually chose to marry as a result of our love. After spending 3 years of marriage, a healthy and energetic boy blessed our family. Utilizing his intelligence, he graduated from a well-known university in our country. Afterwards, he got a job in a top-tier company in the industry, and now he is living happily with his beautiful wife. As parents, being able to see our son's happy life is our greatest joy. However, contrary to our son's prosperous life, the relationship between us as a couple became harder to feel happy about. A number of years swiftly passed since our marriage. Around the time our son took his first step into society, James started showing changes in his behavior. The once gentle and considerate James was nowhere to be found. "Emily, hurry up and prepare dinner." Gradually, he began to see me as nothing more than a housemaid, always demanding things in an authoritative tone. What troubled me the most was his daily changing demands and preferences. "The tomato soup is too strong," he complained. So I made it light-flavored the next day. "Now it lacks flavor," he shouted. One time, intentionally, I served the miso soup with the same taste for several days, yet he continued to whine that it was too strong or too light based on his mood. I realized that he wasn't concerned about the taste. He just wanted to complain and trouble me. Such childish behavior only left me dumbfounded. Lately, James has been getting easily angered, blaming me over trivial things, and the instances of verbal abuse have been increasing. I've been wanting to escape this life and start anew strongly. Lately, I often wondered what caused James to change this much. However, I cannot leave this place. I have a mortgage that hasn't been paid off yet, tying me down. Despite this, James suddenly quit his job without giving a clear reason and now lazes around the house all day. Naturally, he hardly lifts a finger to help with the daily chores and housework. When I come home from work feeling the fatigue of the day, it's usual to find alcohol snack packaging and trash scattered all over the floor. Amidst all this, I manage to maintain the household with the salary I bring home. Actually, the house we live in was recently rebuilt, and I funded it all. Managing the finances of the household, I saved bit by bit for the house's reconstruction. This house is what I worked hard to build. Therefore, I didn't want it to fall into James' hands if I left. Of course, there's the mortgage issue, but this house also embodies my wishes and aspirations. It's a house I had built with detailed instructions, choosing every aspect of it. Among those, I take pride in the spacious kitchen area. It's very easy to move around while cooking, making the cooking experience enjoyable. Initially, James had quite a bit of input on the house's design and layout. I'm covering all the costs for building this house, so I want my wishes to be respected, I told him. After hearing that, James stopped giving his opinions. Over several months, we faced various challenges and unexpected issues, but eventually, the house we desired was completed. Though it was tough to achieve everything within budget, not all of my desired features and details could be incorporated. This house still fulfilled our dream. I felt a deep sense of joy about this reality. However, the cost of construction greatly exceeded our initial estimates, leading us to take on a much larger loan than expected. Taking on such a substantial loan in our 50s was something we hadn't imagined. But thinking about the happiness of our new home gave us the energy to overcome this burden. On the other hand, James seemed a bit sulky because his opinions and wishes were not well reflected in the house design. This isn't necessary, Nier. It's like throwing money down the drain. While I kept ignoring his complaints and grumbles, he gradually stopped talking to me. Instead, he began scattering trash around the house and leaving things disorganized to irritate me. His childish behaviors started to become noticeable. Such actions probably came from his discontent. I wondered when this life would end. I spent every day pondering such thoughts. A few months had passed since we moved into the new house when suddenly, one day, the doorbell rang. We weren't expecting any visitors that day, so I had no idea who it might be. As I was preparing to go to the front door, James got up and headed there before me. Maybe he knew who was coming. After a while, cheerful voices and laughter leaked from the entrance. The moment the door to the living room slowly opened, I saw the faces of the visitors. What could it be? My father-in-law and mother-in-law. Yes, the unexpected visitors were my in-laws, Harold and Alice. To be honest, I always felt pressured in my relationship with them. When we first announced our marriage, they treated me coldly as a woman of lower social status and criticized me quite harshly. Even on our wedding day, they assessed me with an awkward attitude. Their interference continued even after the marriage, and I always wondered how to interact with them each time. I had thought there had been some change or settling down as we hadn't been in touch for a while, but their sudden visit like this surprised me. It's been a long time. I greeted them politely, with slight tension, but they passed by me without a word. It seemed like they intentionally ignored my presence, bumping into my shoulder as they passed. What do you think? Amazing house, isn't it? You should take a look around room by room, James said. It's indeed a wonderful home. I'm envious that you can live in such a place. The kitchen is especially spacious and looks easy to use, said Harold. Yeah, impressive. You've got yourself a good house. Afterward, James passionately showed his in-laws around the house. When they returned, the expressions on the in-laws' faces seemed to be clearly satisfied. However, on the other hand, James' expression was stern, and he suddenly raised his voice in anger towards me. What are you doing? Hurry up and prepare some tea and snacks. My parents are waiting. Overwhelmed by his words, I hurriedly prepared tea and served the snacks I bought the other day. In front of James's parents, I couldn't prepare anything special for their unexpected visit, but I offered the best of what I had. Yet the in-laws looked dissatisfied with the snacks I gave them, and Harold commented with a tilt of his head. Is this the best hospitality you could provide, given that we were coming? He asked coldly, adding on, just as I expected. Although I thought it might be different this time, despite complaining, they quickly finished the snacks and tea. Harold, looking around the interior of the house, commented appreciatively. This is quite a nice house. It seems like a nice place to live, he said with a broad smile. James said to them, Dad, Mom, you're always welcome here. If you want, let's live together here. They, almost ignoring me, listened to James's words and left. Watching their retreating figures, I felt a large gap between James and me. Seeing James chatting and laughing joyfully with them was something I hadn't witnessed in a long time. Afterward, responding to James's invitation, the in-laws began visiting our house more frequently. Initially, it was a few times a month, but gradually it became several times a week, and eventually almost daily. Every time, their criticisms towards me never ceased, and James showed no signs of stopping them. James's attitude of blaming me, along with his parents, intensified. She never listens to what I say. Honestly, it's annoying. I felt that way before. Emily, what do you plan to do about making our sons suffer so much? Harold said, I had not thought about any of this at all. In fact, I was the one facing difficulties due to them every day. However, I couldn't voice the shouting in my heart. Instead, all I could do was utter words of apology. The visits from the in-laws were increasing beyond anticipation, and they began to visit more frequently during my absence. When they deemed I was not home, they visited along with James, but it was clear what they were doing. At home, every time I got back home, cans of beer and empty bottles were scattered everywhere. The traces of spilled alcohol soaked into the new rug, and my heart continued to ache. Why do this? It's a new house, but it smells like alcohol and it's dirty. I don't want any more damage. I said, You always complain despite not being of any help. You're too cheeky. Your job is just to make money and to strictly follow what I say. Don't you understand that? James retorted. Even though he says that the money used to buy the alcohol was earned by me working tirelessly, I couldn't agree with James's way of thinking. James not only indulged in alcohol, but seemed to have ventured into gambling as well, filling my heart with constant worry. Sometimes I would see remnants of used betting slips on the living room table or tucked in the sofa corner. Every time I tried explaining to James the risks of gambling and its impact on our finances, we were already in a tough economic situation, and the losses from gambling were a big blow to us. Moreover, thinking that the money used for gambling was earned by me through hard work made my heart ache even more. It's almost a month since the frequent visits from the in-laws started. Astonishingly, they targeted the time when I was out to visit our home. I wondered every day how to escape this difficult situation. One day, after finishing my work early and heading back home, I found the in-laws leisurely spending time in our home. What are you doing? I asked. Surprised, I raised my voice. Reacting to my voice, the in-laws stared at me for a moment and clicked their tongues in displeasure. From their attitude, I felt as if my presence was bothersome to them. Yet this house is mine. There's no reason for them to intrude like this. On top of the complex interactions with James, the frequent interference from the in-laws increased my stress day by day. No matter how patient one might be, there's a limit to everything. Facing the insolent attitudes and actions of James and his parents, I finally reached my limit. However, I realized that instead of just getting emotional, it was necessary to come up with a plan, and I decided to carefully make one. Amidst all this, something very unusual happened. At a time when I was supposed to be out, the in-laws visited. "Hello, this is unusual. You usually avoid coming when I am here. What's different today?" I greeted them. Against my slightly sarcastic greeting, the in-laws showed a bit of an annoyed face. "We didn't choose the time to come when you are here. It just happened," Alice said. Same old face as usual, the snarky words and attitude of these two made me sigh internally. Yet they pushed me aside and boldly stepped into the living room. "Hey, been waiting for you," James said with a smile. James welcomed his parents-in-law and promptly led them to the kitchen. As I quietly followed them, I noticed the shoes recklessly thrown at the entrance. They seemed to have taken complete ownership of this house, which was very displeasing. In the kitchen, Alice was holding the latest kitchen gadgets and appliances, examining them with interest. New things are really better. "With a kitchen like this, cooking will be more enjoyable," Alice said. "Yeah, the food prepared here would surely taste special," Harold added. As they finished inspecting the kitchen, Harold suggested the next place. "Well, let's head to the bathroom next," he declared. The three of them started walking towards the bathroom. Being able to sense some plan behind the actions of my in-laws, I kept an eye on their movements. Especially the meticulous checks they were conducting inside the house hinted at some hidden agenda. Even when they left the house again, they wore satisfied expressions as if they had confirmed something. "What were you inspecting? Is there something you should tell me?" I asked James. "I told you not to worry. It's none of your business," James replied. James's behavior hinted at hiding something from me. On top of that, I suspected he was trying to manipulate me cunningly. Grasping the real intention was tough, and I had no choice but to observe the situation. Then one day, when I returned home from work, there was a large moving truck parked in front of our house. I immediately understood it belonged to a company called Moving Center. James was seemingly discussing something with the truck driver and representatives. When our eyes met, he pretended not to see me and disappeared inside the house. What shocked me more was that my in-laws arrived at our home at the same time. "Oh, Emily, you're back early. Come on in, Harold," they said. "Right, we can't waste time out here." Their behavior and conversation indicated that they were about to execute some pre-planned action. Though anxious, I decided to quietly wait and see what would happen next. Feeling overwhelmed by the atmosphere, I sensed the somewhat hurried gazes of my in-laws, but entered the house anyway. With each step, I noticed that almost none of the interior I knew remained. Instead, the familiar furniture and belongings of my in-laws had been arranged as if this were their home. My favorite desk and shelves had disappeared without a trace, as if erased with an eraser. In their place, my in-laws' dated furniture stood arrogantly. As I sat down on the sofa, the three of them surrounded me with smirky smiles on their faces. There was a smugness to their smiles, and I could see they were trying to toy with me. "Listen carefully, there's something I need to tell you," James said. "What do you mean?" I responded, bracing myself internally, but with a faint calmness. He sighed deeply and, with a troubled expression, continued his speech. "The truth is I've sold this house to my parents, and I can't imagine living here together anymore. I think we should get a divorce." As if to compliment his words, Harold and Alice also nodded, sending me stern glances. There seemed to be some unspoken understanding among the three of them, leaving me isolated in the situation. From their behavior and words, I could see their plan to sideline me and claim this house as theirs. Having sensed their covert plans, I remained unfazed even when James suddenly announced his intention to divorce. I promptly signed the divorce papers as if I had anticipated this and quietly placed the wedding ring, which I had worn since our marriage, on the table. Staring at James and my in-laws' faces, I declared my intention to leave the house. Since I had anticipated this and planned, I had imagined how shocked James and my in-laws would be, but witnessing it gave me a sense of satisfaction. The fact that I had perfectly seen through their plan and acted accordingly felt like a small victory to myself. With that, I left the house with their astonished faces in the rear view to step into the first phase of my new life. I had been having suspicions about the unnatural behaviors of James and my in-laws, especially since my in-laws started visiting frequently when I wasn't home. I felt that they might be secretly planning something. In response, I was searching for ways to confirm it when the idea of installing surveillance cameras came to mind. Initially, I hesitated, thinking it was excessive to have such arrangements among family. However, as the stress and mistrust grew day by day, I decided to install cameras in concealed spots around the house. These cameras were synced with my smartphone, allowing me to check on the house even when I was out. On the first day after the cameras were set up, I peeked into the live feed on my smartphone during my work break. There was nothing unusual in the footage that day. It seemed like James and his parents were just engaging in daily conversation. However, the contents of that conversation wounded my heart. "I can't believe my son is going through such hardships. She really lacks a sense of gratitude. It's awful how she's making James suffer so much," one of them said. In their conversation, I felt sorrow and anger at the fact that they completely ignored the truth that I was the one supporting our family financially. Since the day I installed the cameras, this thought often crossed my mind. If I were to leave this house, how would James and his parents sustain their living? With such thoughts, I stumbled upon footage one day where James and his parents seemed to be discussing something joyfully. Curious about their conversation, I checked the audio more closely. What was revealed was more shocking than I had anticipated. James was seriously considering selling the house to his parents. Initially, I thought it was just a joke or a whimsical remark, but subsequent footage showed that the discussion about selling the house continued for several days. His parents seemed very interested, passionately discussing the arrangement of new furniture, and especially about making the house barrier-free, which is essential for their age group. After reviewing this footage, I decided to think about the next steps. First, I began searching for a new residence for myself and decided to move forward according to James and his family's actions and plans. Based on the information obtained from the surveillance cameras, I also initiated the process of transferring the home loan from my name to James's. If they were planning to oust me from this home, I thought they should take over the mortgage payments and the associated responsibilities. The monthly mortgage payment of $1,900 was being paid out of the salary I earned from working hard every day. I doubted that James and his parents could afford to pay this amount every month, so I made up my mind. No matter how hard it gets for them, I decided not to provide any financial assistance. Freed from the troublesome relationship with James and his family, I moved to my new home. It was well arranged with new furniture, ready for me to start my new life as soon as I arrived. After a long day, I sank into bed, feeling a pleasant fatigue. The next day was a day off, and I was genuinely relieved at the thought of being able to rest thoroughly. When I woke up, it was already bright outside, and upon checking the time, I realized it was already past noon. This might have been the first time I slept in so long since getting married to James. Just as I was about to doze off again under the quilt, the doorbell rang abruptly. With doubt, I headed towards the entrance, and upon opening the door, unexpectedly, James and his in-laws appeared before me. "Huh, why are you all here?" I asked, puzzled. Although I hadn't told them about acquiring this new residence, I wondered how they knew the location. Without answering my question, the three of them intruded into my house and suddenly spread a document in front of me. "What is this?" James demanded. "You've changed the name on the house loan without permission. Why are you so surprised?" "I no longer live in that house, and we're not family anymore," I replied. "Even so, this is so sudden," James retorted. "It seems that right after I left the house, they received documents regarding the change in the loan name. James and his parents were evidently shocked by the contents. We're currently unemployed. How are we supposed to pay such a high monthly loan? Besides, it's unthinkable to cover this amount with our meager pensions." James's parents expressed these excuse-like words towards me while James nodded in agreement. Indeed, it was a fact that we had overspent due to our somewhat luxurious idea when building the house, but who had been spending their days doing nothing, living carefree without any knowledge. Were they trying to forcibly take over the house under my name? If they had thoroughly understood the details of the loan, they wouldn't have acted like this. As I remained silent, James, with an angry expression, crumpled up the documents. "Don't forget, we won't pay this amount." "Absolutely not." Furious, he threw the documents on the floor. "See, this issue isn't just about monthly payments. If you default, interest and late fees will be added to the amount, and the final payment can end up being much higher than the initial amount," I explained. "What is that? How do loans work?" James asked, confused. "Well, many people set up proper repayment plans to avoid defaulting, so you may not realize it in daily life. But in reality, the risks of defaulting are significant. Just because of that, it's unbelievable to think the amount would increase so easily. If you're doubtful, you might want to look it up on the internet or bank information. It'll be easier for you to understand." Initially, James seemed skeptical, but he took out his smartphone and began searching for related information. A few seconds later, his expression turned into one of shock and distress. Alice peeked over James's shoulder at the smartphone screen, appearing equally astonished. "If this amount is true, what should we do?" she asked. "That's why it's crucial to get accurate information from the beginning and plan the repayments accordingly. This issue is more serious than you anticipated." The faces of James and his in-laws turned even paler. With a deep sigh, Alice spoke again. "We can't come up with such a large amount of money instantly. However, there should be some savings or asset allocation between you two. Right. Honestly, there are no savings or assets. James has no stable income, and he's burdened with a substantial debt from gambling. There's no property for us to divide between us as a couple," I explained. James's face turned even paler as the reality was laid out. "Therefore, I recommend looking for new employment for a fresh start. Discussing for hours here won't change the facts. After all the years we've spent together, why is this happening?" "I wish you'd understand our position a bit more," James pleaded. "Really? Have you forgotten how much effort we have put in for you so far?" I responded. "Effort towards me? As far as I recall, there was never any support of any kind from my in-laws. I don't remember any assistance or support towards me, even when I think back." Upon hearing that, all three vehemently attempted to persuade and mend the relationship once again. However, I shut the door to escape their noisy voices and contacted the police. "People are shouting outside my house," I reported. I didn't feel anything reporting those whose relations had faded with me. Now they felt like strangers. Following police intervention, the 3 individuals demonstrating unrest outside my home were escorted away by the authorities. Later on, due to their financial circumstances, it was concluded that they couldn't afford the house mortgage, so they opted to relocate to a reasonably priced apartment on the outskirts of the town to make ends meet. James, Harold, and Alice attended numerous job interviews. Although successful outcomes were rare, somehow James managed to secure a part-time job and was rumored among the locals to be supporting his family with that income. My daily life remained unchanged, and I dedicated myself to my job. During my free time, I began writing a blog related to handmade crafts. Surprisingly, this blog garnered a lot of attention, and my monthly income increased to more than double the previous amount. Moreover, requests for me to serve as an instructor for workshops and courses related to handmade crafts have been increasing. Currently, I have no thoughts of remarrying and plan to firmly walk through life on my own from now on. One day, I found an old household account book among some old documents. It was from the early days of my marriage to James, during a financially hard time when we meticulously recorded our expenditures. This brings back memories. We documented every little expense. As I looked through the account book, I reminisced about those challenging days, but that's all in the past now. With a sense of resolve, I decided to build new happiness on my own. And once again, I placed the account book back on the shelf.
I woke up to the shrill sound of my phone ringing, Jane's number flashing on the screen. Dread coiled in my gut as I answered, her venomous voice slicing through the line. "Pack your bag, Sarah. Mark's through with you. We found someone better, so there's no point in crying now." My heart sank, but a flicker of defiance ignited within me. After all I'd sacrificed for this thankless family? "I won't leave until we bury Stan, and I settle a few things. This isn't over." I hung up, hands trembling. Marrying Mark had been my greatest mistake, blinded by the hope of giving his daughter Ashley the loving home I'd craved. But his mother Jane's iron grip on the family had steadily crushed that dream, reducing me to a glorified maid. I dragged myself to the kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee offering little comfort. Stan's faithful golden retriever Bailey nuzzled my hand, his warm eyes conveying a sympathy this household sorely lacked. As I stroked his fur, I steeled myself for the emotional onslaught to come. The day passed in a blur of funeral preparations, punctuated by Jane's scathing remarks about my inadequacies as a wife. Mark remained emotionally distant as ever, while Ashley openly mocked my grief. Only Stan's hallowed presence in the silent casket brought me solace. At the wake, I found myself unconsciously gravitating towards Stan's bedside photographs, treasured images of the loving grandfather he'd been before illness stole his vitality. In those final months, our bond had blossomed from my role as his caregiver into a friendship forged by shared suffering. Amidst the hushed condolences, a firm hand squeezed my shoulder. I turned to see Lawyer Jenkins, Stan's trusted confidant, his somber gaze conveying a world of meaning. "He prepared for this," he murmured. "We'll discuss it soon." Those cryptic words offered a glimmer of hope, but Jane's incendiary glares reminded me that this family's axe would fall swiftly upon me once the niceties concluded. Perhaps Stan had foreseen their treachery and made provisions, a lifeboat in this turbulent sea of heartbreak and deceit. As mourners trickled out, I lingered beside Stan's casket, gently brushing away a stray tear. Though the path ahead seemed bleak, a renewed determination took root. Whatever storm loomed, I would weather it with the same resilience that had carried me through life's earlier tragedies. Stan's gruff voice echoed in my mind. "You're tougher than you look, kid." With a steadying breath, I vowed to honor the faith he'd placed in me, no matter how turbulent the days ahead might be. I settled onto the worn couch, cradling a steaming mug of chamomile tea. Even its soothing aroma couldn't dispel the ache that had taken root ever since that dreadful phone call. As the rain pattered against the window, memories of my tumultuous past resurfaced, unbidden. "Sarah, honey, you've got to pull yourself together." My Aunt Maggie's voice rang in my ears, as clear as the day I'd arrived on her doorstep at 16, clutching the tattered remnants of my childhood. "Your folks wouldn't want you moping around feeling sorry for yourself." I'd nodded numbly, my parents' sudden passing still an open wound. With no other family, Aunt Maggie had taken me in, her tough love the anchor that kept me from drifting entirely. Those first few years had been a blur of grief counseling, part-time jobs, and fighting to keep my grades up amid the emotional turmoil. But Aunt Maggie's watchful guidance, coupled with an indomitable will I'd inherited from my father, had propelled me through the darkness. "You've got to make your own way, kid," she'd said gruffly, stubbing out her cigarette. "The world ain't gonna hand you nothing on a silver platter." Her words had rung true through the grueling years of physical therapy school, working double shifts at the diner to make ends meet. But I'd clawed my way to the top, fueled by a burning drive to craft the stable life I'd been denied. That's what had drawn me to Mark. His daughter Ashley's haunted eyes had mirrored my own orphaned youth. I'd been determined to spare her the same loneliness that had nearly consumed me, resolving to create the nurturing family I'd craved. How tragically those noble intentions had been perverted by the corrosive influence of Mark's mother Jane and her incessant belittling. With each snide remark, each deliberate slight, she'd chipped away at my sense of self-worth. "Did you really think someone like you could be part of our family?" Her nasal whine grated in my mind's ear. "You're nothing but a charity case, letting us support you out of pity." I forced the memory away, fingers tightening around the ceramic mug. Jane's disdain had only been exacerbated by Ashley's escalating cruelty. My treasured childhood keepsakes inexplicably misplaced, the framed photos of my parents somehow accidentally shattered. Mark had been my sole ally in those dark days, his smiles and squeezes of reassurance the only thing anchoring me amidst the emotional tempest. Yet even his support had waned as the years wore on, his commitment to appeasing his domineering mother slowly eclipsing the vows we'd sworn. I sipped the tea, its warmth a fleeting comfort. While the path before me seemed daunting, Stan's parting words remained a rallying cry. I may have been the underdog, battered and browbeaten, but the same fighting spirit that had delivered me through life's earlier trials was still alive. "This isn't the end," I murmured aloud, as if uttering the vow could render it real. Not by a long shot. Whatever treachery Jane and her cohorts had concocted, I would meet it head-on with the same resilience that had defined my journey. They'd sown the wind through years of emotional torture. Now it was time to reap the whirlwind. The rhythmic beeping of the machines provided a somber soundtrack as I gently sponged Stan's withered arms. His labored breaths rattled in the stillness of the bedroom we'd converted into his sick room. "Easy there, kiddo." His gravelly voice broke the silence, his trembling hand patting mine. "You've got to take it easier on yourself. Jane and that wretched brood of hers aren't worth this much fuss." I managed a weary smile, brushing a damp strand of hair from his brow. "You know I can't do that, Stan. You're the only one in this family who's treated me like, well, family." He harumphed, those rheumy eyes holding a glimmer of tenderness. "Ain't no fault of yours this sorry lot turned out so sour. If I could do it over again." His voice trailed off with a wistful sigh. In those unguarded moments, I caught fleeting glimpses of the past that weighed so heavily on him, the long hours invested in his medical practice, the slow fracturing of his household as his wife and children's bitterness took root. "I won't let you bear this burden alone," I said firmly, meaning every word. Stan's gruff humanity amidst the relentless cruelty had been my sole lifeline these past few years. He squeezed my hand, his gaze earnest. "Mark's gonna try to turn you out soon as I'm gone. You know that, don't you? Already got the papers drawn up to cast you aside like some busted piece of equipment." First, my throat tightened at the casual viciousness, but I gave a resolute nod. "Then we'll just have to make sure that doesn't happen." A ghost of a smile played across Stan's lips as he patted my hand again. "Let me tell you a little story about this prissy little tax inspector who came sniffing around a few years back." I settled in to listen, savoring these moments of wry camaraderie and hard-fought wisdom. Whatever challenges loomed, Having Stan in my corner was the greatest reassurance I could ask for. In the days that followed, I doubled my efforts to ease Stan's discomfort, our conversations taking on a bittersweet poignancy. Whether regaling me with pranks from his medical school days or offering nuggets of unexpected life advice, he seemed determined to share every scrap of himself before the end. The night I found him slumped over his bedside table, I thought my world had shattered irrevocably. "Stan! Stan!" I shook his shoulders frantically until those eyes flickered open, his breathing shallow. He gripped my arm with surprising strength, his gaze boring into mine. "Sarah, you listen to me, you hear? I'm leaving you set up proper." A racking cough cut him off as I fumbled for the emergency call button. "Save your strength, Stan. The paramedics are on their way." He wheezed, mustering what little remained of his formidable will. "Don't." Another cough racked his brittle frame. "Don't let them." I squeezed his hand, blinking back hot tears. "I won't, Stan. I promise." Those cloudy eyes held mine for a heartbeat longer before rolling back in his head. Grief engulfed me, yet within its depths smoldered a renewed determination, a promise to honor his faith and make good on those vows, no matter who stood in my way. His final, wheezing exhalation marked the end of an era and the beginning of my war against those who would see me crushed. The days blurred together into an endless cycle of medications, sponge baths, and Stan's labored breathing. I clung to his bedside, savoring each lucid moment like a priceless gem amidst the fog of his deterioration. "You're doing great, kid." He'd rasped those words repeatedly, his papery hand enveloping mine with a surprising warmth. "Don't let them grind you down, you hear?" I'd nod mutely, throat constricted by the emotion those simple reassurances stirred. In those moments, Stan's rough compassion outshone the cold indifference that had seeped from the rest of the household. Jane's periodic sweeps through the sick room were accompanied by her trademark snide comments about the stale air and my apparent incompetence. "Honestly, Sarah, couldn't you have opened a window? Or did they not cover basic hygiene in that cow college you attended?" Mark would trail in her wake, features etched in discomfort, whether from his father's condition or his mother's histrionics, I could never tell. His gaze would slide past mine, our once warm connection frayed by years of eroding resentment. Ashley, for her part, made no attempt to mask her disdain for the grim realities unfolding. I can't be around all this dying oldness," she'd sneer, flouncing from the room with a roll of her eyes. "It's like totally morbid." Only Bailey, Stan's faithful golden retriever, provided a constant, uncomplicated source of comfort. He'd settle at the foot of the bed, his liquid brown eyes fixed on Stan's withered form as if standing an unwavering vigil. In those still moments, I could almost convince myself that affection still flickered in this hollow shell of a home. Then, one leaden afternoon, chaos erupted, Stan's heart monitor shrilling as his frame contorted with a massive seizure. I shouted for help as Jane and the others came running, profane curses spilling from their lips. The paramedics arrived with practiced urgency, blocking me from reaching Stan's convulsing body. Through the tangle of limbs and shouted orders, I locked eyes with him for the barest instant, those cloudy irises holding a lifetime of rueful regret and a silent plea. At the hospital, a grim-faced doctor briefed us in terse clinical tones about Stan's catastrophic stroke and diminishing oxygen levels. The prognosis was grim. Even if he regained consciousness, his quality of life would be severely compromised. "What about extraordinary measures?" Jane cut in, her voice shrill with insistence. "Surely there are procedures." The doctor raised a hand, shaking his head. "In cases this severe, it would only serve to prolong the inevitable pain and suffering. I would advise exploring palliative options and preparing for—" "No," Jane's shriek lanced through the hushed waiting room. "He's not giving up that easily, not while I still need—" She caught herself, shooting a furtive glance at the doctor before smoothing her face into an unconvincing mask of grief. I watched in sickened silence, the grotesque reality finally crystallizing. They didn't care about Stan's comfort or dignity. He represented their final hope for securing an inheritance, no matter how much suffering it cost him. My hands clenched with impotent rage, even as Jane turned those glinting eyes upon me in wordless warning. 2 days later, the machines powering Stan's ravaged form finally fell silent, As his loved ones clustered around with practiced solemnity, I felt his spirit release in one final sigh of liberation. The shackles of their greed forever broken. My role as caregiver had ended, but a new passenger had boarded this runaway train of heartbreak and betrayal. Cold, implacable vengeance. Jane's cruel gaze drilled into me like a dagger's point, but this time I met it with steely defiance. "Pack your things and get out." Her nasal tones cut through the stifling air like a scythe. "You're utterly useless to this family now." A tremor of grim satisfaction coursed through me as I straightened my spine. "I'm not going anywhere," I said quietly, "until we put Stan to rest, and I settle a few scores that are long overdue." I stood my ground as Jane's face purpled with apoplectic rage. "How dare you make demands after everything we've done for you?" she sputtered. "We kept a roof over your worthless head out of pity." Mark shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Sarah, maybe we should all take a step back and—" "Don't you coddle this ingrate." Jane's shrill tones sliced through his attempts at diplomacy. "I want her out before the funeral. She'll only make a spectacle with her hysterics." Jaw clenched, I fought for composure in the face of her venomous tirade. Exploding in impotent fury would only vindicate her disdain. Ashley sidled up beside her grandmother, smirking derisively. "Yeah, beat it, Sarah. We don't need some sad sack charity case raining on the parade." She snapped her gum obnoxiously. "It'll be a relief not having you moping around anymore." I fixed my gaze on Mark, willing him to reclaim the decency I'd once loved him for, but his eyes skittered away guiltily, and I knew in that moment he'd traded his backbone for Jane's approval long ago. Mustering every ounce of poise, I held up a staying hand. "I'll go once we've laid Stan to rest properly. After that—" I let the implication hang, heavy as a guillotine blade. Jane opened her mouth, but whatever retort she intended withered in the face of my resolute stare. For once her raptor glare had found its match. The following days were a study in forced civility and bitten tongues. Only when making the requisite funeral arrangements did our battle lines dissolve briefly into an uneasy truce. Jane may have been a viper, but even she understood the sanctity of mourning traditions. The memorial service itself was a grotesque pageant filled with Jane's crocodile tears and fulsome eulogies that made a mockery of Stan's memory. I sat hunched in the front pew, fists clenched as she droned on about what an exemplary father and provider he'd been. The hypocrisy oozed like runny eggs, and I fought not to retch. Behind me, Ashley's theatrical sobbing left damp patches on the shoulders of her overpriced dress. Only Mark's face remained impassive throughout the garish display. Finally, blessedly, it ended. The somber procession trailed out, leaving me alone to crouch before Stan's simple oak casket. With trembling fingers, I traced the carved initials as a lifetime of memories cascaded over me. His gruff chuckle, the gleam of mischief in his eyes, the quiet pride as I mastered caring for him. "You didn't deserve this circus, Stan," I murmured, fighting the sting of tears. "But I'll make it right, no matter what it takes." A faint scuffing behind me broke the reverie. I turned to find Jane framed in the vestibule, those hawkish features arranged in an expression of patented disdain. "I want you gone in the morning," she pronounced flatly. "The lawyers will be in touch about finalizing the inheritance?" My voice sliced through her words like a scalpel. "Yes, I imagine there's much to discuss on that front." Her brows knitted in bewilderment as I rose fluidly and brushed past her without a backward glance. Let the crones stew in impotent confusion for now. Soon enough, the tables would spin with such ferocity that even her unfeeling heart would reel. Tomorrow was the first day of a new future, one built from the wreckage of their betrayal. I only hoped Stan could see it unfurl from whatever tranquil beyond he now occupied. As I exited into the brisk evening air, Lawyer Jenkins materialized from the shadows like a wizard conjuring from the mist. "Shall we take this to my office, Miss Turner?" he murmured, those glinting eyes holding a universe of secrets. I nodded curtly, falling into step beside him as the sky surrendered to an inky everfold of possibilities. A tense silence hung in the air like a suffocating fog as we assembled in Lawyer Jenkins' austere conference room. Jane's eyes bored into me with the intensity of a laser cutter, daring me to make the first incendiary move. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, loosening his tie as beads of sweat gathered on his furrowed brow. For once, the smug veneer had cracked to reveal the fissures of doubt gnawing beneath. Ashley was a study in affected nonchalance, idly buffing her nails as if this legal showdown was merely an inconvenient hiccup delaying her next Instagram selfie session. I met their subtle provocations with an impassive mask, allowing the weight of their impatience to escalate the slow drip of unease. Finally, Jenkins cleared his throat and slid an official-looking dossier onto the table's polished surface. If we could attend to the matter at hand. He lifted his gaze to Jane, who was practically vibrating with accusatory zeal. "This is outrageous!" She sliced the stale air with a bony finger. "That woman has hoodwinked you into some kind of illegitimate inheritance claim using God knows what lies about my poor Stan's mental faculties." Mark opened his mouth, but she barreled forward with the force of an avalanche. "We have documentation proving our legal standing as next of kin. Whatever schemes she's concocted, they won't stand up to." "Madam," Jenkins' mild tone nonetheless carried an adamantine edge, "if you'll permit me." He withdrew a sheaf of papers, placing them squarely before Jane's mottled glare. "These are the legal adoption papers signed and notarized by your late husband over a year ago. They clearly state his intentions to establish Miss Turner as his legal heir and beneficiary." You could have heard a pin drop in the ringing silence. Jane's mouth worked furiously, but only garbled stammers emerged. Across the table, understanding bloomed like a cesspool on Ashley's face as she gaped at the documents in revulsion. "No." The whisper was a strained rasp of disbelief. "That crazy old bat couldn't have." Jane slammed her fist on the table with a meaty thump, sending a litter of pens skittering. "It's a forgery. Everything she's done since worming her way into our lives has been a ploy to swindle my family's rightful inheritance." With a weary sigh, Jenkins produced another folder, extracting a handwritten letter that he slid towards Mark's ashen countenance. "I regret this letter was necessary, but given your, shall we say, troubled family dynamics, your father insisted on making his wishes explicit and legally binding." The lawyer's gaze flicked to the apoplectic Jane. He knew there would be unpleasantness. As if in a trance, Mark's hand slid the correspondence closer, his eyes devouring each looping scrawl of his father's unmistakable penmanship. I could practically see the ground crumbling from beneath him, eroding every plank in the platform he'd so meticulously constructed around his hollow existence. It can't be," he rasped, anguish twisting his features. Jane snatched the letter with clawed fingers, gulping furiously as the damning text sank its hooks. A ghastly shade of puce crept up her jowls as the true extent of the reckoning became apparent. "You vicious little harlot!" She caterwauled the words in a glass-shattering screech, spittle flying. "You conniving gold-digging witch! I'll see you destitute on the streets before—" Her scream was severed by a violent coughing spasm that racked her frail frame. Jenkins calmly proffered a glass of water, which she swatted away with disdainful fury, only to crumple into a pathetic wheezing heap. The inheritance. Ashley's soft murmur was a blade in the unnerved silence. All those plans, all that money, gone. She turned her gaze to me, naked hatred scorching like twin blowtorches. "You hateful bee. That's quite enough." Jenkins rose smoothly, his tone hardening like carbon under compression. "Miss Turner's legal position as primary beneficiary of the Turner estate is incontrovertible. I suggest you come to terms with that fact and avoid further unpleasantness." The dagger of his stare leveled on Jane, still drowning in her anguish and rage. I held that malignant glare, allowing a fleeting glimmer of vengeance to glint in my irises. It was a meager victory, the opening salvo in a war that still loomed before me. But by God, I would savor it. This was just the beginning of my long-overdue retribution. The Turner clan's reckoning had only begun to unfurl. The weeks following that fateful meeting passed in a blur. Jane's mewling pleas for leniency fell on deaf ears as I steadfastly severed every slimy tendril still binding me to their toxic orbit. "Sarah, please?" Mark's voice had taken on a plaintive, haunted timbre as the reality of his situation congealed into inescapable truth. "We can still work something out, for old time's sake." I fixed him with a level stare, allowing the memory of every slight, every callous disregard for my humanity to galvanize my resolve. "Old times are precisely why there's no going back, Mark. You revealed your true self long ago. I'm just honoring that reality." His shoulders slumped in naked defeat as I turned and walked away without a backward glance. Any residual embers of affection had long since turned to ash on the pyre of their betrayal. Ashley proved equally obstinate in her desperation, resorting to the only arsenal she knew, petulant tantrum and hollow manipulation. "You have to help us," she'd wail into the phone, her words slurring from whatever substances she'd been abusing to dull the pain of facing consequences. "We're gonna lose everything. The house, Mom's stupid little shop, everything." I'd remain impassive, allowing the silence to underscore her spoiled pleas until she'd erupt in a torrent of profanity and slammed the receiver into oblivion. Let the brat drown in the miasma of her own making. I'd sung that siren song too many times to capitulate. Only Jane's fall from delusional grace carried any flicker of satisfaction amidst the morass. Once a vision of coiffed entitlement, her threadbare existence now consisted of a grim rotation of court appearances, creditor houndings, and desperate schemes to forestall the terminal diagnosis of poverty. "You don't know what you're doing to this family." She'd rage fruitlessly whenever our paths briefly merged. "Once the money runs out, you'll have destroyed us. Is that what you want, you miserable wretch?" I'd simply gaze at her impassively until her tantrum momentum burned itself out, leaving her haggard and panting on the cold reality of her own poor life choices. It took months, but slowly the tumorous mass of their financial ruin metastasized. The estate dwindled to a parity through reckless borrowing, till even the rambling house I'd endured so much misery within was repossessed. The day the moving vans rolled up to dispossess them of the roof over their heads, I felt nothing. No elation, no pity, no scintilla of regret, just emptiness. Through the plate glass window, I observed Jane's waxen pallor as the last vestiges of their tawdry legacy were boxed and hauled to parts unknown. Beside her, Ashley openly wept, huge, gulping sobs of the perpetually indulged. If I squinted, I could almost discern the faintest shimmer of a smile haunting Mark's hollow features. Some tiny fragment of his soul had welcomed this karmic absolution, this cleansing gale scouring the rot from his cloistered existence. As the trucks rumbled away, belching diesel exhaust, I allowed a fleeting reverie, Stan gazing down with a craggy half-grin and an approving nod for the protégé who'd carried his final sacred trust to its inexorable conclusion. The sun dipped low, banishing the departing caravan of change in ruddy brilliance. A new era beckoned on the molten horizon, and I turned to greet it with a lightness I'd never permitted myself in this waking purgatory. In the distance, a solitary bird issued a soaring, hopeful cry of liberation. Or perhaps it was merely the rusty gate of my personal jail finally swinging wide. The crisp autumn breeze carried the faint tang of wood smoke as I pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Rehabilitation Center. My pulse quickened with a mixture of reverence and determination. This hallowed ground represented so much of what I'd sacrificed, but also the promise of a new beginning. As I strode through the gleaming lobby, well-wishers and former colleagues emerged like a receiving line of ghosts. Polite smiles and handshakes blurred in a kaleidoscope of vague familiarity, until finally, mercifully, I found myself ensconced in the hushed sanctuary of my new office. The diplomas and certifications arrayed on the walls seemed to gaze upon me with mute approval. Reverentially, I traced the raised lettering of my physical therapy credentials, hard-won talismans that had been denied their full potential for far too long. A gentle rap forestalled any more introspection. Marcy, the center's merrily plump administrator, poked her head through the door with a warm smile. "All settled in and ready to get cracking, I see. Wonderful to have you back on the team, Sarah." I returned her smile, the first genuine one to grace my lips in recent memory. "It's great to be back home where I belong, Marcy, though I can't promise there won't be some adjustments." She gave me an appraising look, eyes twinkling with humor. "I have it on good authority. Those famous Turner stubbornness genes have been passed along to the next rightful heir." A hearty chuckle escaped before I could stifle it. How strange and wondrous to experience such uncomplicated camaraderie again, without the lingering stain of bitterness souring every human interaction. As Marcy's ample form retreated, I settled into the supple leather chair and allowed my gaze to roam the empty office that would soon become the launchpad for my own personal renaissance. After years treading the threshing floor of misery and despair, I now commanded the territory of my own redemption. The hours melted away in a flurry of unpacking, form filing, and preparation for the imminent influx of new patients. With each passing minute, I felt the weighty shackles of my imposed identity steadily loosening their rusted grip. Sarah Turner, beleaguered ex-wife and victim. Those ashes had fueled the fire that would give rise to the radiant, self-actualized phoenix emerging from the cindered residue of oppression. I straightened the simple nameplate centering my new desk, permitting a sense of hard-won pride. The low December sun bathed the room in a warm, rosy glow as the day's final appointment wrapped up. I lingered for a few stolen moments, breathing in the atmosphere of freedom and purpose that still carried a heady novelty. A kernel of wistfulness tugged at the corners of my heart as I traced the names and numbers meticulously scrawled in the logbook, each one representing a battered psyche or broken body yearning to be made whole again. The whir of tiny wheels preceded Ruthie, the center's endearingly chatty custodian, as she trundled her cart full of cleaning supplies through the doorway. "You're still here, honey?" she asked with a sunny smile. "Figured you'd be halfway to that fancy new condo you're moving into by now. With all the celebrating, I bet you've got planned." I chuckled at her irrepressible assumptions. "Nothing too fancy, Ruthie. Just taking my first real deep breaths of freedom." The older woman's eyes crinkled in empathy as she nodded. "Ain't no better feeling in this world, sweetie. You just keep on breathing that good air and letting the light shine on that pretty face again." As she bustled onward in a wake of lemon-fresh fragrance, I allowed those simple words of hard-won wisdom to permeate my very core. For so long, the veil of toxicity had obscured the path stretching forth, its twists and turns obscured in murky vapor. Now that fog had parted to reveal a shimmering vista, its horizons rippling with infinite permutations of potential redemption. My fingers tightened around the leather-bound datebook, a fierce sense of clarity washing over me. No more hesitation or existential pondering, no more cowering in shadowed corners. This was my life's chronicle. And from this chapter forward, its pages would blaze with the brilliance of 1,000 conquering suns.